Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Namaste Wellness Show, where we talk about all things holistic health for the mind, body, and spirit, for people and pets with a touch of cultural soul. My name is Laura. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I'm really excited to have back on my podcast Dr. Robert L. Green to continue our series on talking about his life and legacy as a civil rights activist, educator, and just overall great family man. So let me just welcome you back, Dr. Green. Thank you for being here. Okay. So
good to be back.
Good to be back. Yes, good to be back with you as well. So how are things been going? How's the family? Have you had a good summer? Before we get into the meat of the interview.
It's been a good summer with the boys and with my grandkids. I have a grandson. His name is Zai, Z-I. Zai is about two and a half years of age, but a very bright young man. And already I'm working with him. By the way, he's starting to read at 2.5, 3, and I'm working with him. And he started to ask me questions at 2.5 or 3.
Wow.
Where are you, Grandpa? Where are you going? Who is this, Grandpa? Pointing to pictures. He likes to come into my study. I have a lot of pictures in the study, and he likes to come into the study and just look at pictures. And I encourage that. He's
so he's interested in the family history already.
Yes, he wants to know who is this, who is that, and I talk to him and explain to him who they are, what the relationships are, and so forth. So I've had a good summer. I've been here pretty much. Letty and I don't travel. We do not travel like we used to. And I've had people contact me about traveling, and Letty and I have pretty much said we're not going to travel much. So far, we haven't traveled at all this summer, by the way. We've been here all summer long.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, maybe that means people have to come and see you guys.
Well, as a matter of fact, I got a note here that a guy by the name of Khalid. Khalid is a black guy. He just got a big job. He's the state school superintendent for the entire state of Pennsylvania. Sharp guy. He's coming to see me on the 26th of September, and he's bringing another friend of mine. So people are starting to come here. That's a good idea, Laura. I will encourage that. To look, I'm old, I'm 90, I'm old, I can't travel, but you can come see me.
All right, then. Well, we might have to make a trip down there and see you too. That would be nice.
Would love to have you come.
All right, thank you.
And Kevin has decorated his house nice, so we would have a bedroom for you to stay.
Oh my goodness, thank you. That sounds awesome. Well, I'll definitely keep that in mind. That'll be something to really look forward to.
Okay.
Well, good. I'm glad you're having a good summer. It's not quite over yet, so I don't want to rush the time. But so today we're just going to continue talking about your life and legacy as an educator, as a civil rights activist. You were also very good friends with Dr. King. You worked with him. You were also very good friends. You and your wife and your family continue to be friends with Coretta Scott King, even after Dr. King was assassinated. So today we're going to focus a little bit on your earlier family life. You had 9 sisters and brothers, and I'm just going to put this up. I don't know if you can see the picture here. I know, of course, you know all about the picture. And one of the things that I thought was really important in the book one of your, well, first I'm gonna let you talk about maybe the relationship you had with your sisters and brothers growing up, how they influenced you to be the person you are today, and just what it was like growing up in a family of 9 sisters and brothers.
Right. It was quite an experience. I had good brothers who were very bright. My oldest brother, Havius, had a wonderful group of 8 girls. And I always kidded him about it because he always wanted a boy.
Hmm.
And I said, you spent all that time trying to have a boy and you ended up with 8 girls. But all 8 of the girls are smart girls. Havius, I thought was a little strict. For example, he wouldn't allow them to have a television. He said, you can't have a television, but you can have books. I want you to get books and read books, but my brother didn't like TV. So the girls were very conscientious. They all did well academically, and I always respected my brother Havius. I got along well with him. My second brother, Tom, was a medical doctor. We got along well. Unfortunately, he died at a young age. He died at about 50 or so, which in those days was very young.
Right.
Then my brother John was just ahead of me. Then I was the next one, and I had a pretty good relationship with John. The only thing that bothered me about John and my dad used to go at it. John didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to church either. We had to go to church a lot. I would want to stay home and play with the boys in the neighborhood. And so when I grew up, when I was a little older, I was talking with my dad. I said, Dad, why did you make us go to church so much? We went to church on Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Friday. I said, what church are? He said, well, I tell you what. He surprised me. It wasn't that I was so religious, but I saw the boys of other ministers who were in trouble. It was because their dad was out preaching, trying to save people, and their kids were going down the drain. And he said, I knew if you were in church or playing, he would even let us play outside the church. I could keep my eye on you. And that really made a positive impact on me.
Yeah.
And I always respected my father for that. He did keep his eye on us, especially the boys. See, in those days, police officers basically were white.
Right.
And a black boy could get into trouble real quick, not by anything they had done, but by how they were perceived by law enforcement. And my father was sharp enough to know that. So he kept his eyes on his boys. And I really respected him for that. When he told me that, he said, it wasn't that I was so religious. If I knew if you were in church, you were not on the streets getting in trouble.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And he was very smart in that, to do that. And, it was a way of protecting you all too.
That's right.
And actually the churches back then too were like a center of community life, because at that time, even Blacks were still not able to really assimilate into the white community. So the churches were a source of entertainment, community, in addition to,
church dinners.
Pardon?
Church dinners.
Church dinners, exactly.
Like on Saturday. My Aunt Rose, I was driving early. I was driving kind of naughty before I even had my license. And I used to, my Aunt Rose would, on Saturdays, would prepare a full meal for $2.50. and
Wow.
sell them to church members all around Northwest Detroit. And I would get in the car and drive and deliver them. And my Aunt Rose paid me to do that. So
Oh,
anyway, those are the days in which I think adults played pretty much a good role in our lives. And
yeah.
my brother did. I respect my brothers and sisters and
Mhm.
my mom and dad. We were truly, as Sly of the Family Stone would say, we are family. We were family,
Yes,
and we
yes.
were family because my dad was always conscious about his boys getting in trouble with the police,
Mhm.
and it never happened.
Good,
And I have to give my father credit for that.
good. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, you all, in addition to doing all the different activities at church, that was also a source of well, it was a source of the for support for the entire Black community, because I think in the past I had heard that people, and you know, that was very wise in the Black community to do that, because I think a lot of I think that whites, from what I read my research and understanding, whites seem to think that Blacks were religious because they were not smart, you know,
I
not
wanted to go to heaven.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, and nothing against. I mean, I was raised in the church too, and you know, the church just had so much to offer, I think, to the African American community.
You're
And
absolutely right.
you all met a lot of, for example, and I wanted to bring this up too. You're great. I just found out from Hazel, one of your nieces, that I believe your grandfather on your mother's side was became a doctor in 1904, which was pretty amazing too. Are you familiar with?
I did not know him.
Okay, well, you know, Hazel does a lot of research
Hazel
and
is
family history.
she would be a one to talk to. Hazel probably has done more family history than anyone else, including me. I know a lot
Uh-huh.
because people brought stuff to me, and I ended up writing books. But
Right.
Hazel has done, I would say, she has done better research and more research than myself. She's
Yeah.
good.
Now, I don't know, don't quote me. I don't know if he was also a minister, but I think he was one of the first Black doctors, and that went to the Meharry Medical College
Yeah, my
in
brother Tom did.
1904.
Yeah,
Pardon?
my brother Tom went
Uh-huh.
to Harry Medical School.
Okay.
He got
Okay.
his medical degree. He was the first, I think he was the first MD in the family, medical doctor,
Okay. In your immediate family.
in the immediate
Because it
family.
sounds like your grandfather was, you know, one of the first African American doctors. And I mean, in 1904, that was really a
That's
big
amazing.
accomplishment.
That's
And
something I need to check out.
yeah, yeah, check into that. I mean, when she told me that, I was really, you know, amazed and impressed. And I knew that I don't know if the church has something to do, because it seems like the church was like a cocoon for Black families back then, those that, you know, partake into going to church and participating in church services.
Right.
So anyway, okay, so also what I wanted to talk about today were two very important relationships in your civil rights activism, and that's your relationship with Arthur Ashe, who was not only a sports icon, a very famous tennis player. He played all around the world, and I know he was also a civil rights activist. So I wanted to have you share with us a little bit about your relationship with Arthur Ashe, how you came to meet him, the work that you all did together, because I know he was focused on the apartheid situation in Africa, while you were doing a lot of work here in the, you know, during the Jim Crow era in the US, and how those two related to each other, and how you guys work together.
Yeah. Well, I guess there was a man by the name of Donald Dell, Dell.
Mhm.
Donald Dale was a sports activist in
A
America.
sports activist. Okay.
Yeah. And he was very active himself in sports. And he knew Arthur Ashe. And he wanted Arthur to go to South Africa to play tennis. He knew people in South Africa. And he was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Dale, Dell.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how he found out about my relationship with Arthur, but he did. And he had, there was a congressman from Detroit by the name of Diggs. He was going to go to South, let me back up. Arthur was cautious about going to South Africa by himself.
Mm.
He wanted to go with some other black to go with him who was well known, just for protection.
Mm-hmm.
And Congressman Diggs from Detroit agreed to go with Arthur. But he got into some kind of political problem in Detroit and he wasn't able to go. So I heard about it, and I was at a meeting somewhere, probably at the U.S. Open, because I had a station wagon, and I would take my 3 boys and Letty to the tennis matches each year at the U.S. Open in New York. And one summer we went, and this man came up to me and said, "Hi, I know you, don't I?" I said, "No, you don't know me." And I started to walk on.
Mm-hmm.
Walk on. And Kurt has always known people of entertainers. Kurt said, "Dad, do you know who that was?" I said, "Who?" "That was Dustin Hoffman."
Oh, wow.
I said, "Who is Dustin Hoffman?" He said, "Dad, he's an actor."
Uh-huh.
And so he said, "You should at least say hello to him so we could say hello to him." And I kind of brushed it off.
Oh,
because,
wow.
and I eventually did talk to him.
Okay.
But how did I meet Arthur?
Mm-hmm.
I think probably at the U.S. Open. Letty was always a good mama. She would buy the kids neat little clothing. So you was all these white folk, and you see this black guy and a black woman, Letty dressed, Letty dressed
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, always.
And with these little boys dressed on nice with shorts on, and people always wanted to know who they were. Who are you? I said, "I'm nobody." I said, "I'm just a teacher at a university." But whites would come up to us and ask us, "Who are you?"
Okay.
They couldn't imagine a black those days traveling to New York for a tennis match. And I did, because I love tennis.
Okay.
And that's how I got to know Arthur.
Okay.
I didn't know Jeannie Ashe at that time. They were not together. Arthur was a single guy.
Okay.
And an
Now,
excellent.
wasn't it, but he did, I mean, I'm looking in the book though, is you did mention that, well, then you all did get to know each other. And then at some point during there was a tournament in Johannesburg in the mid 1970s, and he was playing in that tournament, and he invited you and Andrew Young to go to Johannesburg with him, correct?
Yes, he did. He did.
Okay. So,
He invited me to go to South Africa with him. And I decided I would go.
okay.
Daddy was a little worried about me. I said, "Daddy, nothing's going to happen to me." And I remember on the airplane, Andy Young and I stopped off and spent the night in London. I didn't know anybody in London, but Andy Young at that time knew people there.
Yeah.
And so we stopped off in London. And Andy Young and I were flying. I remember we were flying the next day, flying from London to Johannesburg. And I said, "Andy, how do you feel?" He said, I feel great. I said, aren't you a little worried you're going to South Africa? He said, you know what? I feel more comfortable traveling to South Africa than I feel driving through Mississippi.
Wow.
He said, in South Africa, the government, white government, is going to protect us because they don't want any trouble with America. But he said, ain't nobody going to protect you in Mississippi. You go to
Right.
Mississippi. So Andy didn't have the fear that I had. I had a little fear going to South Africa. But when I got there, I had what they call a white pass. How did I get it? I'm trying to think how I got it. A passport. On the back of the passport, it had something about America, Black, and South Africa. And I can't quite remember. I'd have to go back to my notes
Okay.
and find out how they came about.
I think there was something about that, something similar to that in the book. Because I do remember in the book, you said when you all got to South Africa, you were, I mean, the apartheid over there, they had segregation, like they did here. And that you all were able to stay in the white hotels, whereas generally you would have had to, they were not allowing Blacks to stay
As a
in
matter
white
of
hotels.
fact, I remember a Black guy came up to me. He said, "Hey man, come here."
Mhm.
He said, "Where are you? Where are you?" He said, "I can tell by your accent you're not South African. You're from America." I said, "Yeah." He
Mhm.
said, "How did you get into South Africa?" So I said, I showed him my passport
Mhm.
and it had on there Black South African. I
Mhm.
said, he put it on my passport that I was a Black South African. He
Mhm.
said, go back to your room and look at that other passport and see what's on it. And I went back to my room, found my other passport, and it had on it uh, Black, South African, American. It had something on it to show that had gotten special permission to be in South Africa, not as a Black American, but
Mhm.
as a Black South African.
Mhm. Well,
And,
how did
and
you feel?
Laura,
Okay.
I could be a little wrong on some of this.
Uh-huh.
I haven't looked at my notes in a long time, and I need to do that.
Well,
And
you do know, but you know that when you realize when you got there, how did you feel coming from segregated America going to South Africa and being treated better than the Black South Africans there? How did that feel when
that
you
was a weird feeling.
uh,
It really was. And the thing that was interesting was that other Blacks would come up to me and
mhm.
want to know who I was.
Really?
Who are
You just
you?
had that air about you. Apparently, you
And I stayed in a European hotel.
right.
And they just couldn't understand how that happened.
Mhm.
So they were good. I was always very friendly to,
Mhm.
to Blacks. And
Mhm.
they would come up to me and ask me, how did you get in this hotel?
Mhm.
As I said, I remember a guy from some part of Africa.
Mhm.
He wasn't from the States. He said, how did you get to stay here? I said, I don't know. He said, you got something on your passport that allows you to stay in this hotel.
Mhm.
And when I got my passport, I saw the notation on there that I was some kind of special Black.
Mhm. Now, I wonder, wasn't there something though to do with the fact that Arthur Ashe said that he wasn't, he might, maybe he refused to play or
Yeah,
something if you all were not allowed to have proper accommodations as
right.
any other dignitaries? And do you think that might have been why?
That was, oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, there was a guy by the name of Donald Dale. He was
Mhm.
an American who had a great deal of. He was a top tennis player, and
Mm-hmm.
he had a lot of influence in South Africa.
Okay.
And South Africans went to Donaldale. They wanted a major tournament,
Right.
and how could you have a major tournament when one of the top players
Right.
was black? And Arthur was not
He was a
anxious.
Arthur Ashe was a superstar
He could
at
beat
that
anybody.
time,
And
right?
so how did I'm going to have to review my notes
Mm-hmm.
again. It was Arthur Ashe and my relationship with Ashe, and Ashe introduced me to Donald Dale,
Mm-hmm.
and Donald Dale was the one who eased the path for me begin to move around South Africa as I did.
Okay. Now, there was also in the book, it talked about you and Andy Young being over there together, and Andy Young he was trying to actually see Nelson Mandela, who was in prison at that time. And did they say why? Because in the book, you said they refused to allow Andy Young to see Nelson Mandela. Did they say why?
They were dishonest. They
They were
gave
just,
Andy the impression that he would be able to see Mandela.
mm-hmm,
But when he got there, I know. I said, okay, you go see Mandela. I ran into a black reporter for the black
mm-hmm,
newspaper, and he wanted me to, visit with the black students.
mm-hmm,
You're a professor, so I said, okay. So Andy got permission from the government, and they told him that he was going to be able to see Mandela.
mm-hmm.
When it got down to the wire, they wouldn't let him see Mandela.
And no reason. They didn't say why. It's,
And
mm,
uh, Laura, I need to review. We need to set up another time, and I
okay.
just need to review some of my old notes because
Okay.
some of this I'm not quite comfortable with what I'm telling you. Not that any of it's very, very off base, but some
Mm-hmm.
of it is. Because, see, I was going to go with Andy to see Mandela.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, a black reporter, a young guy, asked me would I visit with the black students. So the
Yeah.
black students who were protesting, I didn't go with Andy to see Mandela.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, they didn't give a reason even in your book, it didn't say that they gave a reason why they refused. And like you said, it was probably something dishonest. And I don't want to think, negative, but if they didn't offer a reason, it does make you kind of wonder why he wasn't allowed to see Nelson Mandela. Now it did say, reading in your book, it did talk about how while you were in Johannesburg, South Africa, students actually came to you. They came to the hotel to see you and to talk to you about what was going on in South Africa. And also you talk in your book about how you were able to get many students from South Africa to come to Michigan State,
Right.
and that they came to Michigan State, they graduated, and some of them went back as doctors, went back to South Africa and became successful after coming. You were able to get so many students to come to the U.S. to Michigan State at that time.
I
Can you share
remember that.
anything about that or how that?
That was, to me, that was a good experience. My wife was good. I think I brought 13 back the first time, 13
Mm-hmm.
students from South Africa to East Lansing. And they came back when it was getting cold and they didn't have any clothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Letty happened to mention it to some of the white women that she was playing tennis with. My wife was a good tennis player.
Your
She
boys play tennis too, right?
it
All
was
your boys play tennis. Yeah.
very good tennis player. So when these white ladies found out that, you know, I'm a middle class, upper middle class white star, when they found out that they had 13 students and they didn't have any clothes, they asked them to find some clothing for them.
Okay.
They just meant some old clothes. Those women took those guys out and bought them all winter clothing, nice stuff.
Oh, wow.
And so my wife made sure that they had whatever they needed from a clothing standpoint. And I was able to get the university I had what they call a dean's fund. Every dean had, I think it was $35,000, which in those days was a lot of money that they could use as long as it was not used on yourself or your family. It had to be used for some educational reason. So I had money, and I was able to get some clothing. And Letty and her white female friend, tennis players, they came together and made sure that the students all had clothing. But they didn't even have clothing.
Wow.
But there's a young lady by the name of Miliswa Sobukwe. Sobukwe was a South African fighter. And I didn't realize his mother, Miliswa's mother, had a state funeral not too long ago. And I found out just in the last year that when Sobukwe died, Miliswa's mother kind of took over and fought. One was the language problem. The government wanted the South African students to speak, they call it Afrikaans in the schools. They said, we're not speaking Afrikaans, we're going to speak English.
Okay.
There's a big conflict over the language issue. And I got information on that. I need to look at that more fully to make sure I'm giving you accurate information.
Okay, well, we're just having a conversation about these things. So, I think whatever you're sharing and from your memory is still, valuable information. So
Thank you.
I want to ask a couple questions. I know that Kurt had here about Arthur Ashe. How would you say Arthur Ashe's involvement in the civil rights movement contributed to raising the awareness about systemic racism and discrimination in the U.S. and South Africa at that time?
Very much.
What were some of the outcomes that you recall? And with your involvement with Arthur Ashe as well.
With Arthur. One was being able to get those first group of students into the country.
Okay.
That was important.
Good.
And I think about 13 or so. And many of them, for example, one is the dean of a college of education in the southern part of South Africa right now.
Wow.
But I need to, as I said, Laura, I'm apologizing today because I've been working on something else about civil rights. But I need to review some notes I do have. Make sure I can give you more information about Ashe.
Okay. Well, I apologize. I didn't give you enough warning on this either, but I think that was the big first step, though, bringing African students over to the U.S. to be educated, and then, allowing them to stay or go back and be, successful.
Yeah.
So I think that was
very successful. One, my wife, I remember a young man, I got into medical school. The dean of the medical school lived not far from me.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I walked over to his house, knocked on the door. I didn't bother about going through secretaries and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey man, to do a favor for me. He said, "What?" And once in those days, for me, if I said I want you to do me a favor, they would jump because
Mm-hmm.
that means you owe them something.
Oh.
So he said, "Oh, what can I do?" He was shocked. I said, "I have a young man who uh, is taking biochem, chemistry, and some other science courses. He's from South Africa." And I said, "I want him in medical school." He
Okay.
said, "Oh, okay." He worked with them for a whole year or two. He got into medical school.
Oh, wow.
And I took Letty to South Africa with me about 2 years later. And this guy came up to us. This was more than a year, maybe it was more than a year later. A guy rolled up to us and parked a Bentley outside of the hotel. And turns out that this was the guy that Letty bought clothing for, and I got into medical school. He
Oh, wow.
went back to South Africa and built a very successful medical business.
Wow.
So some of the students did very, very well. And
Well, I think that in itself was a great accomplishment, and be able to move the society forward and beyond apartheid.
yeah,
So I just want to, I mean, I don't know if this is a good question to ask you, or how would you, because how would you compare apartheid in South Africa with what they're calling, I don't know if you don't have to answer the question, what they're calling apartheid in Palestine?
in Palestine.
Yeah, because they're saying there's apartheid in Palestine, and is that the same? It seems
Oh,
different than. Oh, okay.
much more, it was harsher. See, a lot of Israelis, my Jewish friends, Israelis, feel very uncomfortable with this topic because
Okay. Well, you
it
don't
was.
have to, if you think it's
I was just say that
okay.
it was uh, it was Jews in South Africa who gave South Africans strategies to deal with blacks,
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
and they don't talk about it a lot.
Oh, okay.
uh, there's this tension. So there's not a lot of discussion about it. But Israel was very supportive
Mhm.
of white South Africa because of the problem they were having with Arabs
Oh, okay.
and Hamas at the
I see.
time. Mhm. So
Okay.
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, I don't want to don't want to, be controversial. So also now Arthur Ashe, he was his life and career were marked, again, this was one of Kurt's questions, by his commitment to integrity, compassion, and advocacy. That's how you viewed Arthur Ashe. So what personal qualities or values did you observe in Arthur Ashe that made him such a powerful force for change?
Well, one,
Mhm.
Ash would not involve himself in anything that he would not involve himself in anything that reinforced apartheid. And
Okay.
do that.
Okay.
And Arthur was a very powerful person,
Mm.
and whites knew that.
Okay.
So when Arthur would make a decision, um, people would listen to him.
Hmm.
Arthur never, to my knowledge, made a decision or took a stand on a political issue that negatively affected blacks.
Okay.
For example, I remember
He
I'm
was true. He was true to his conviction.
Italian, this conviction,
Yeah.
and Arthur was not afraid.
Hmm.
He was not a fearful person. Um, I remember there was a big tournament in South Africa with Arthur Ashe, and I'm blocking on a tennis player's name, white tennis player. And
Dale? You're not talking about Donald Dale?
not down there, there was another one that played Arthur Ashe in a tournament.
Oh, okay.
And they put me up in the box with the prime minister and so forth. And I watched the match, and Arthur lost to this guy, which was very unusual. He was a top white tennis player in America. So later on, 2 or 3 years later, Arthur was up against him in a top tennis match here in America. I think it was in DC. And I'll never forget, Arthur beat him. And the word got all the way back to South Africa that Arthur, Jimmy Connors, I think it was Jimmy Connors, Arthur Ashe had beat this prominent tennis player, white, in a big match, and I was there.
Oh, okay.
Well, Arthur was looked upon with favor, and everything that he did, to my knowledge, that related to South Africa, it was done in a positive way.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a lot of respect for Arthur, and he was not afraid.
Yeah.
And he, Andy, and I, the three of us were very close.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to. I did want to also talk about that relationship, your relationship with Andy Young, which is still going on to this day. I don't know if you remember, I called you a few weeks ago. Actually, I think when the Olympics had just started, and I said, "Oh, I saw Andy Young on TV." He was at a speaking engagement with President Biden at the time, and you know, I mentioned to you. So you had opportunity to work closely with Andrew Young as part of the civil rights, during civil rights, along with Dr. Martin Luther King. So we might have to talk more about it in our next podcast, but I wanted to see if maybe you want to talk a little bit about the relationship with him now and how you guys collaborated and worked together with Dr. King on civil rights in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, Andy was the one that came to me and said, "Bob Green, you ought to use some of your influence in the university world with SCLC. And you don't do that." Oh, Andy said, "You live in a good life in East Lansing." That's what he said. "You need to break away from that good life and help us down here in the South." And I did. And I did it in such a way that I became known by Black students and white students as a sensible activist. In other words, I wouldn't do crazy stuff. Like that train incident. You ever see that train incident in my book? I climbed up on a locomotive and stopped the train that was going to run over during the Meredith March.
Okay, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I
don't remember all the specific details, but
details is short. We had marched from Jackson, marched from Memphis all the way to Jackson, 3.5 weeks, and I led the march. And
I remember that. I think we talked about that in a previous podcast, but go ahead, continue.
And yeah, Key put me in charge because students would listen to me because they knew I had been at a university. And the real militant groups, believe it or not, were white students from Cornell and University of Chicago and Michigan State. They would go south and try to change things overnight. They were white. And I used to tell them, I said, there's certain things you can't push Blacks to do here in Alabama and Mississippi because you're going back to Chicago.
Mm,
Back to New Jersey. And
right.
these blacks are going to have to deal with the whites down here in the
Here,
South.
yeah, in the South.
So I took more of a sensible approach uh, to change because I knew what price blacks would have to pay.
Mm.
Uh, Fannie Lou Hamer and Septima Clark were two people that I worked closely with.
Now
And
was that for voting rights?
yeah, that was well, actually, that was the voting rights campaign,
Uh-huh.
and I had a lot of influence with Fannie Lou Hamer and Septima Clark because they knew that I understood the South, and I learned a lot about the South from Septima. I always say Septima Clark and Fannie Lou Hamer were my tutors.
Mm.
They tutored me how to deal with white people
Mm.
in the South.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's how I knew I could relate to blacks. See, I take an example.
Uh-huh.
Suggs Ingram. Do you have a copy of my book?
Oh, yes, I do. That's what, yeah, that's
Look
what I,
on Suggs Ingram.
we're at the crossroads of fear and freedom. This one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
yeah.
you got it. That's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
All right.
And
So,
by the way, I'm just, everybody should go on Amazon and buy the book. It's a very interesting and um information, a lot of information in here, a lot of good information on civil rights, the civil rights movement. Yeah.
I uh, knew Martin Luther King Jr. when I went south.
Mhm.
He said, "Bob, I want you to work with me."
Mhm.
I said, "Yes, sir, I will." I
And
said,
then that's when you became a Southern Christian Leadership Conference director, right? The educational director at the
I
time.
was education
Yeah.
director.
Mhm.
And so that was a challenge
Mhm.
because I was looked upon as one of those smart Negroes from the North, even by a lot of blacks. As a matter of fact, the first meeting that Dr. King took me to, there were about 200 black preachers there.
Mhm.
And Daddy King, Martin Luther King's father, had me stand up, say, all you preachers out there call yourselves doctors. You ain't no doctor. See that man right there? He's a real doctor.
Oh, wow.
I said, oh my God.
It put you on the spot.
I wanted to crawl off the room,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't. So, but later on, Daddy King was my big supporter.
Uh-huh.
When I needed to see Martin Luther King Jr.
Uh-huh.
And see, I didn't realize later on all the dynamics of what was going on. For
Mhm.
example, Martin Luther King Jr.'s secretary, her name was Dora
Mhm.
McDonald. And little did I know that Dora took care of his schedule.
Mhm.
Anywhere he went, Dora knew where he was.
Mhm.
And Dora didn't like me because I was close to Martin Luther King. It was a
Mhm.
little petty stuff.
Mhm.
But anyway, it all worked out.
Yeah.
I'm working on some other stuff
Uh,
in which I want to talk about that. Uh,
okay.
I
Well,
learned
go ahead.
I learned that Black Southerners had been through so much
Mhm.
that here I am with a PhD coming from the South, and Andy Young had seen the home we had in East Lansing.
Mhm.
They didn't know. He would talk about how well we lived. And
Mhm.
people thought we were coming down to show off. I
Mhm.
was coming down to save my soul and to
Mhm.
help other blacks. I
Right.
didn't care anything about power and I didn't want a title. And they were afraid I was gonna get a title, and so I had to deal with the politics of the
Mhm.
South.
I hear you.
And my wife had to deal with, for example, the women had a luncheon one day.
Mhm.
They told Letty it was her job to call Mrs. Abernathy, Ralph Abernathy's wife, and invite her. When Letty called her, she wants to know, well, who are you? I said, my name is Letty Green. She said, where are you from? She said, well, my husband works for Dr. King now. He does? I don't know him, so he can't be very important. So we
Wow.
we had to deal with stuff. So I told Letty, I said, Letty, we ain't gonna be down here long. The reason we came back though was not because of the politics, because Martin Luther King Jr. called me in and asked me to stay with him. And I told him it would be up to my wife. I said, talk to her. I knew what Letty's response was going to be. Letty wanted to get back to East Lansing. And so he asked Letty if she encourage me to do another year or two in the South. And Letty didn't want me to do that because I spent the whole summer of '66 in Mississippi.
Wow.
And I didn't spend a lot of time with the boy. So here's another thing too. I have Bernice King, I think, interested in doing an article, The Children of Civil Rights Workers.
That's a good topic. And I want in our next if we can kind of hold it there, I like that topic, so we can talk about that in our next podcast, because I do want to talk about your relationship with Coretta Scott King and her children, who you all traveled, and we'll talk about that next time, because that's one of the things I did want to bring up in our next podcast. And I also want to talk a little bit more about Andy Young. So I think we're at time now. So I want to go ahead.
Kurt too. I never knew this, Laura, till about maybe 2 or 3 months ago. Kurt saw me in here writing something. Kurt told me that he would watch the news when I was working in Mississippi every night to make sure I was still alive. He was only about maybe 10 or 11 years old. And I never knew that.
Wow.
So I was telling Bernice that. I said, Bernice, you know a book you could write? She said, no, Uncle Bob, you see a good topic, you write it. You know, nobody likes to write. So I didn't realize my son Kurt and Kevin's too young, and Vince were worried about me.
Wow.
Whether or not I was alive. Kurt said he watched the news every night. This is the news, you know, in those days, they had the civil rights news on every night to see if his daddy was still alive.
Wow.
I said, wow, Kurt, I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. Well, on that note, I think we are at time now. Dr. Green, I want to thank you so much for joining me again today. And we are going to get together and talk some more about some of these topics. And I'm sure
I'll be better prepared.
Huh? What you say?
Next time I'll be better prepared.
Oh, no, you did just fine. No worries. I think everything is just fine. We're going to keep it moving forward. So with that being said, like I said, go out and buy the book At the Crossroads of Fear and Freedom by Dr. Robert L. Greene. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great read. Until next time, stay safe, stay well. Namaste.